Welcome back to MidPoint, the people's candidate for president in 2016 who believes he's never been a politician, and that's going to work in his favor. Dennis Lynch joins us once again from New York. Dennis, you, in a clip that we played at the beginning of the first segment, you mentioned Senators Cruz, you mentioned Ben Carson, and you also mentioned Rand Paul. Why did you mention those three, and what's your point about them and what they stand for in relation to what you stand for?
Well, first of all, I think they're all great men. But secondly, is that the number one issue in this country, whether people want to recognize it or not, is illegal immigration, because it touches everything. It touches health, it touches education, it touches the workforce, it touches welfare, elections, and terror. So if you take all of that and you ask each man how it is that they would solve that problem, when you go to Cruz, Carson, and Paul, they're all upside down. They all talk about the sexy things that people like to hear. We need to secure the border. Well, I've been to the border, and I've been places where it's so secure you'd be shocked. They're still coming in. What you have to do is you have to rip the incentive out for people to come here illegally. And that gets done two ways. Bullet pointed, you have to fine employers who hire these people, and if they do it again, you have to prosecute them. And then you have to start deporting people and allowing them to go home and say, America is no longer giving away jobs to people who break the law. That is never, ever discussed by any of those three men. And though I have great respect for them, if you can't solve the number one problem in the country, you can't solve number 2, 3, and 4, which is welfare recipients, the amount of people who are out of work right now, terror coming through the border because our border patrol are too busy with illegal immigrants coming over with little kids. It all connects. So if America is going to get back on track, Ed, we've got to look at the number one problem and solve it.
Now, you have been said to have some very harsh comments from time to time about immigrants in the past and in other interviews. And you certainly know, as someone who has been on television many times, that things will always come back to haunt you sooner or later. It's strictly just the way the media works these days. How would you answer those who would come to you and say that your stance on immigration is extreme when you say things, and please correct me if this is wrong, that you reportedly said of immigrants as criminals, that some of them are coming to America, quote unquote, to cut your throat?
Yeah, it's absolutely untrue. Just even the way you're putting the question to me, you're saying the word immigrants. There is a far cry between immigrants and illegal aliens. I embrace immigration. I think it's one of the things that makes America great. I'm talking about illegal aliens who are coming in this country unlawfully. There's a distinction between the two. And not everybody who is coming through the border illegally is coming here to cut your lawn or to come here and work. Some people are coming here to cut your throat, meaning terrorists. And as a man who stood at the bottom of the buildings on September 11th and watched my fellow Americans go down 80 stories, I know it to be true. I also know there are congressional reports that state that terror networks are working with the drug cartels and coming in and out of this country with no problem at will. So if somebody wants to take my words and spin it and say that I'm against immigrants, it's because they fear me. They fear my message. So they're going to try to knock me down and say I'm a racist.
How would you answer those?
I told you.
And how would you answer those people who would say, first of all, and I want to give you a chance to all this, but how would you answer those people who would say there is no proof that any terrorists have actually crossed the border to this point? And there are those people who would also say, a number of broadcast and printed reports as well, who would say there is no proof that terrorists are working with drug cartels on the other side of the border. How would you answer those?
I would say that then you're actually taking a congressional report and saying that it doesn't exist and it's not for real. Then you're taking any communications that the government has had between cartels and going back over into terror networks in the Middle East. Any of those reports are completely untrue. I'll tell you what. I have been down in the desert and I have found things that would come from the Middle East, and I'm wondering why anybody in the Middle East would be there. In Mexico.
What have
are
you
they
found?
there crossing over the border?
Dennis? I'm just curious. What have you found?
Oh, I have found prayer rugs, Korans. Look, I got movies that show this. Prayer rugs,
and you
Korans,
have evidence of this, if anyone
foreign
would ask.
currency.
And you have evidence of this, if anyone would ask.
Yeah, you could. Of course. Well, anybody who asks obviously haven't seen any of my films. I have the visual. It's not something I'm just saying. It's something I could show you.
Real quickly,
Ed,
then, about a minute or so.
What do we need?
Okay, I'll let you go ahead, please.
Yeah, go ahead.
I have about a minute left. Go
Ed,
ahead.
what do we need? Do we need another terrorist attack for me to come here and tell you that I'm right? We need to secure our borders. And we have 50 border states, as far as I'm concerned. We have international airports. We have ISIS. ISIS wants to absolutely destroy the United States of America. Anybody who doesn't realize that must have voted for Obama, to be quite honest. We have a serious problem in this country. We have people who want to take away lives and take away the prosperity that has been worked for so long. I am not going to allow that to happen.
Dennis, it is certainly interesting when you have anybody who wants to run for president, because some people would want to ask them, why would you want that job in the first place? 15 seconds, why would you want the job?
I have a tattoo on my left arm. It's with a shamrock. Around that shamrock are the names of 4 children. They're my children and my wife. I want to protect the country I love. I want to protect the American people who I love. And I certainly want to make sure that my 4 children have a future.
Dennis, it has been a pleasure to have you on the show. I am absolutely certain that we will see you again leading up to 2016. Thanks so much for your time and your comments.
Thank you, Ed.
All right, later on this hour, what should not be the first thing you say to your wife after you show up from being missing for years? This is Outland. This is MidPoint.